Hey. Okay, let me add Dr. Kimberly Douglass. Share it with her. Let me see. Hey. Co-host Dr. Kimberly Douglass. Invite.
To go live with
There we go.
Desiree. Hello.
Hello, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm good. I was just telling Andy, I said, feeling bloated, but otherwise I'm good.
I'm so excited to be doing this with you. Alexa, stop.
I know, this is great.
I can't really hear you though. You're not very loud.
Okay, hold on. Is that better?
Speak again.
Hold on. Is that better?
Not really.
Hold on.
Okay.
Is that better?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Significantly.
Okay. And so my son is playing like doing these video football games, and every now and then he'll just get really loud. So I was trying to use my earbuds, but sometimes it just doesn't work.
No worries. I have three. So maybe somebody will barge through the door at any moment. This week they're actually starting school, which is wild because we've been on an unschooling journey for quite some years, but it's about that time.
Well, speaking of which, you know what? I feel like I've heard your name before, TikTok, because we went on our unschooling journey starting in 2019.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I have. So once we get through our series, we'll have to come back and do that one.
I would absolutely love to do that. I shared a lot of myself on Facebook and my life. So I'm not surprised because I think it's a really small circle of like Black people who are unschooling. But yes, we will come back to that. But
Okay.
right now, I want you to introduce yourself and tell everybody what we're
Yeah.
going to be doing for the next few weeks.
I'll start with introductions and hello everybody. Thank you for being here. So we're here with Desireé B Stephens, and those of you who are on my timeline, you know who I am. And hello to those of you who are following Desiree, not following me, please go ahead and follow me. And if you're
Yes, please
following
do.
me and not following Desiree, please go ahead and do that. So we'll do the introductions, and then I'll come back and I want to talk about like how this all came to be. But I'm
Absolutely.
Dr. Kimberly Douglass. You can call me Kimberly. And so I have been on TikTok since November 2021, and my work has evolved a little bit. So the space that I'm in now is really working on my second book on decolonizing neurodivergence. So I'm using TikTok as my outreach for the book and also for my crowdfunding for the book as well. So if you're on here, you've been following my content, you found value in my content, go to the first link in my link tree, click that link, and that takes you to my crowdfund. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. My background prior to getting out here in the wild west of TikTok and starting my own business, I was in academia for many, many years as both a faculty member and as an administrator at two different universities. And so I am a kind of a network systems thinker person. So what I do out here in this space is think about how all the information we have about decolonization, which would need to define, and neurodivergence in particular, how all of that kind of comes together, and thinking about the new systems that we need to make things work for us. So, Desiree.
Well, thank you very much. I, like you, started on how it, I don't know, but it evolved, and so have I, and I'm enjoying it. In about 2015 or so, I started with my on Facebook, and I had a group called Social Matters, and we were pretty much dissecting all of the little microaggressions that were happening on those neighborhood apps, right? Like Black Man Walking. I'm like,
Right.
talk about this a little bit. And that just continued to evolve. And I created Make Shift happen and an online community outside of Facebook, simply because Facebook kept blocking me and like hitting me with 30-day bans. And I was like, I need something where I can speak without being censored. And it just evolved from there into like doing decolonization counseling, because there's such a deep need for it. And then digging into all of those systems, right? Like finding these connections, realizing, wait a second, this all works together. And how
Mm-hmm.
can we dismantle it? But I don't believe in limbing the tree, right? Like, oh, like if we're just doing anti-racism work, if we're just doing, neurodivergent work, if we're just doing all of these things, we're limbing the tree. The ruling class doesn't care about that. And the root is still absolutely rotten. So for me, decolonization is about dismantling the entire system, deconstructing it, and figuring out what new systems and connections we need in order to build something new. So that's me. And here we are. And I'm so
And here
excited.
we
That
are.
shows me.
So,
I'm like, fangirl.
so it's just really interesting.
Where'd you go? I think she hit something. Let me invite her back.
What happened?
I don't know. But here you are
Okay,
again. So
we're
hey,
back again.
we're back.
So, um, so it's interesting. So we responded to each other in the comments and everything on TikTok, and then I saw you had posted the list from that piece about white supremacy culture, and it was interesting because between the first book that I wrote on decolonizing neurodivergence up to I'm writing the second book, I had come across that list. And when I saw the list, and this is a list by Tima Okun,
Emma Unkun. Yeah.
and
I'm not sure about the second person. I'm not
yeah,
sure.
I'm not sure about that either, but it's about 15 items that describe white supremacy culture. And it was like I had written that first book before I discovered it and realized, wow, that like that book is about that whole list right there.
Yes.
And so I started to, really, my mind really churned on some things. And so when I get stuck, actually, when I'm writing and I get stuck, I go back to the list because the list has a lot of explanatory power. But you posted about a few days ago that list, and it includes things like perfection and urgency. Tonight, we're going to talk about right to comfort as one
Right.
of those values. But you posted the list, and I remarked that, how that has really guided my work and how we should talk about it. And it just kind of took a life of, we just kind of took off from there. And so what we decided to do was to do a short series of about 5 of those
Yeah.
items.
Okay.
And we started with urgency, but once all the discussion came up this week about Elizabeth, the monarch, um, then this theme of right to comfort kept coming up over and over again. And so we decided to make that shift. So when you think of innate ways, so we talked about what decolonization is, right? And so we're not talking about um, episodes by themselves. We're talking about what is happening in a broader context, what happens with systems. And so when people say that they are decolonizing, it is about dismantling those things that cause us, those systems that cause us harm over and over again. So the systems can include processes, it can include policies, it can include agreements, it can include practices within institutions, um, it can include state violence. And so,
Correct.
when we focus on things like, well, as an individual, I'm not a violent individual. Well, you don't have to be if you can farm out your violence to the state. So you don't have to be violent. But the one we're going to talk about tonight is the right to comfort. And so when I say like we put all those words together, what does that mean to you?
For me, the right to comfort, I think that, we kind of discussed in the back end, like this would be a good place to start. I think originally we were going to start with sense of urgency. But then, the queen died. It's a warm chuckle in me heart. And this idea, this right to comfort automatically is like, it's this need to not feel uncomfortable, to not hear the bad things about someone. And we see that very specifically when someone dies, even in our own personal lives, right? I consistently make a difference between like what you go through interpersonally is not the same as systemic. But even in an interpersonal space, it's like all of a sudden this person was so amazing and they died and it's so sad. And it's like, but were they really? Were they this great person? And then when you have someone who's literally like an OG colonizer
Mm-hmm.
in this day and age, like this is not like, oh, you know, your ancestors of yore. This is like like today, right
Right.
now, right? Like I'm like Ireland is still colonized in the north today,
Yes. Yes.
today as
Yes.
2022. So when you really realize that and you just see like this visceral reaction that happens from people like, oh, no, we can't say these things. This is that right to comfort. Like you should always be comfortable. And it kind of really like we could talk about one, but you could really see how they play off of another because it also
Yes.
opens up to that
Yes.
fear of open conflict, right? Like this idea, this homogeneousness, I may have made that word up. This that need to be homogenous is systems of whiteness. Like, no, we must all like the same thing. We must all go and just do this, and it's okay. And it's like we are allowed to express our grievances. And just because you're uncomfortable with it doesn't mean that someone should stop at
Right.
all.
Right.
So I think that we really saw that to play on a global scale. You could see the impact, one, of colonization. I also witnessed how many white people had no idea about, I'm like 80% of the world, Craig, the world. You think
Yes.
80% of people are supposed
The
to speak
world.
English and serve one God, and you
Yes.
don't stop talking. Just you guys
Well,
are not
and
allowed
it
to talk.
and it just speaks to the belief in the right to comfort. Like
Yes,
you don't have to step outside of yourself in order to understand what's happening with other people. And so when I think about, and I had that same thought, like I had written down all these notes, which I had left in the other room, but I was thinking the same thing. Number one, I was thinking about what you just said. When you think about all of these different values, these supremacy values, but like they all hang together in a certain way. They all serve each other. So, um, but the at the end game, when we get to the end of whatever this arc is, it is about moving the goalpost so that certain people are never right. There are foregone conclusions about how this is supposed to end. So it's a right to comfort for certain people. It's not a right to
correct.
comfort for all people
Mm,
because people were willing for it to be okay. And by the way, if you all like what we're saying and you are vibing with what we're saying, please give us likes,
yes,
engage, ask questions. But it's not a right to comfort to everyone. So when I
correct.
think about this list, I think about um, who can demand these things and who are these things demanded of.
I really like that.
So,
I
so
like
when you
that
think
line.
about, yeah, so when you think about like right to comfort, according to the conversations we had this week, from a dominant culture, they have the right to comfort. They have the right to change textbooks so that, or and shape curricula so that you never have to find out about these things. But I do not have that right to comfort.
Right.
And the way that just the conversation about the British monarchy and its rule and some of the old footage and not so old footage, how it's very triggering to a lot of people. And I know people overuse that word, but I mean this in like a mental health
Oh no,
sense.
I
It's very
agree.
triggering to people. And so we don't have the right to comfort, right? So there are these foregone conclusions that list gets us to. It's certain people's comfort, but the right to comfort is a trap. It is a way of keeping people thinking outside of themselves. I believe, and this is just like kind of my personal notion, that you're provided this right to comfort in society because you cannot comfort yourself. You cannot comfort yourself if you will not address the things that you need to address personally in terms of what has happened in your lineage, but also what has happened in your life and the harm that you have caused. You will not be comfortable. So, because I've heard people talk about like how there's this big codependence with Black people, and I see it. It's like we are here to comfort everybody else.
I want to interject because I completely agree with your train of thought, and like That word codependence always activates me, right? Because there is an
Mm-hmm.
interdependence that we need as a collective, right? Like
Yes, yes.
interdependence is that I'm over like white people being codependent and needing us to co-regulate them. They're not even, it's not even a co-regulation. They actually need us to regulate them. If there's no co-regulation happening. So yes, I agree with that completely. And we need to be getting to a point of interdependence to get back to that like community style living. And I think that when we're talking about right to comfort in regard to where you're talking about, simply because I pathologize whiteness, I'm like, the people that are talking are not even comfortable in whiteness. That is what's wild
Right.
to me.
Yes,
It is
yes,
like,
yes.
who are you protecting? Who are you
Right.
making comfortable? I've seen people, like I said, I was on Facebook this week and I took a little bit of a TikTok break just to kind of like decompress and
Good for
just
you.
do all of the things. So on Facebook, I get to be a little bit more silly. I get to be a little bit more myself. But I've seen so many people who claim to be Irish, I'm like, not understand this, and I'm like, this is exactly what a plastic patty is. If you don't understand
Right,
what's going on in Native Ireland right now, today, with your cousins, stop that. And that right to
right.
comfort, you are literally only protecting the ruling class. When I tell
Yes.
white people to divest from whiteness, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you
Right,
are mourning the queen. Why?
right,
Why?
right,
What has she done for
right,
you? What is
right.
very specifically if you're American? what is what exact she's not even doing anything for her people over there or didn't. What is
No,
she doing
no.
for your American self?
Right. Exactly.
And that's
She,
epigenetic trauma. That's what that
yeah,
is. It's
I
a
believe
longing
so.
to be home. You are descendant of these colonizers. It is a calling in your soul to feel aligned with these people. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That is your grandmother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And very much so, your
Right.
grandmother was alive during those times when people were like, oh, my grandmother said she's never lived in a world without the queen. Well, my grandmother never lived in a world without violent white people. So, I mean, what do you want me to tell you?
Yeah. It's really interesting. And like people really doubled down on the conversation. Like there was no room, even in when it was clear that they didn't have a lot of information about it.
None.
There was this longing, there was this calling them. For me, what she represents is the institution or this ideology of whiteness. And so there are people who have been committed to protecting that at any cost. So what we would consider to be everyday people who are logical in every, or usually speak logically in every other way, it's just like that just went out the window. You can't even have a conversation about it.
No.
Um, yeah, it really was mind boggling the level of harm that people were willing to cause in order for them to to be comforted in the space for someone who doesn't even have anything to do with us in this country.
At all. But back to that, it's that epigenetic trauma, it's that longing to be held. And I think that when we really try to take a like that bird's eye view, right? What happened over here when America was placed on top of Turtle Island? America is a business. And I don't even want to, I say America so loosely, and it's really an entire continent. The United States is a business sat
Mm-hmm.
on top of Turtle Island. And all it
Mm-hmm.
did was reinvent the monarchy from poor people who would never have titles, never
Right.
have the inn, right? Because they were pedigree. Those people, those blue bloods, that's why the marrying of cousins, they intermarried. This
Mm-hmm.
is their legacy. And it's like, how do you guys not make the connection when you guys will make fun of your poor white people? Oh, you guys marrying your cousins.
Right. Right.
They learned it from their forefathers. This
Right.
is normal on how you keep your money in. And these ruling families, these founding families here in America, literally just reincarnated the monarchy under free market capitalism. Well, we'll never have, inherited titles, right? We won't be
Mm-hmm.
duchesses, but we could do this with money. And now they just leverage all of the poor people, the poor white people, to
Mm-hmm.
uphold that. And they love to.
Right.
And they jump to it. And I'm just like, you do realize that when Black women are talking about liberation, you would be free too, right?
Right. And some people are willing to forego that freedom.
Oh, yes.
Because I think about like the wages, healthcare, things that just simply, like I think about what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi right now, and just not a peep out of people. So, you talked about the United States, like being right. It's a corporation, and the states are individual corporations. The
Yes.
municipalities are corporations. All of these things, they are corporate entities. So one of the ways that I came into the conversation about decolonizing was again talking about neurodivergence. And what I noticed when I got on TikTok was a lot of people, who are discovering that they have some type of neurodivergence. And when I say that, what I mean is like ADHD or autism or bipolar disorder or something. They knew something was off and they never could quite put their finger on it, but they started hearing traits and putting things, piecing things together. And I'm not talking about people like, talking about people who really thought about this really long and hard.
Right.
But what I noticed was happening was eventually the conversation got stale. And here's why I think the conversation gets stale and it goes through waves and cycles. Because when you come to a platform, public platform like this, you come, if you're neurodivergent in the way TikTok works, a lot of people come here for the personal validation and they get it. But the thing about and TikTok runs like a casino with the intermittent reinforcement.
Yes.
And so, but the thing about TikTok is it keeps you kind of in this loop where you're looking for that next hit, that next confirmation, that next validation. And what was happening is I saw people coming here to get that personal validation, they would get it. And then it was like, it just wasn't enough. Like they have to keep seeking it from new creators or whatever. But I, after a while, it became clear to me is because it's just conversation. It's just
That's it.
conversation.
With
And people,
no
you know,
actual solutions.
no, and people think that they're doing work, but they're not doing work. And what I noticed in particular was when you have conversations about race and how autistic Black people are treated different, even from autistic white people, people will just drop out of the conversation. And my point of view became that if you're not having a conversation about the autistic Black male who has been sentenced to 30 years in prison, then you are not talking about shit. You are
That
just
part.
talking. If we're just talking about how your parents made you feel, and when you go see a therapist, you go see a counselor, and you just talk about how you need to be quote unquote fixed, and you're not talking about the systems that have impacted your life and how these systems have shown how you have harmed people through these systems. If you're not talking about all that, then you really are not having a true and open conversation. And what a lot of people end up doing is coming in contact with others as they're trying to work through their diagnosis or their self-diagnosis or their formal diagnosis. They get a lot of that right to comfort.
That goes it, and
So
that's what it is. That's it. Like as long as they're censoring themselves, and I think a lot of it, like tying that neurodivergence key into like these supremacy pillars, because you call them values, and there's like it's not. I mean, it is valuable to the ruling class, right?
they
Um,
value it.
yeah, but I really try not to. I really do my very best to not like make anything white sound amazing, because there is no value, there's no privilege. It's trash, and it's killing everybody, right?
Mm-hmm,
So like, and when I say by white, I mean like these systems of whiteness. I know there's white people
mm-hmm.
that clutch their pearls right now. You can't help how you're born. I'm talking about these systems because these
Right,
systems don't even care about your skin. They're just
right.
leveraging you. But that all being said, is that this is what I mean with the divesting from whiteness and centering Blackness. Like, if we are not
Mm-hmm,
centering unambiguously Black people in our conversations, we're really not trying to make systemic change, right? And this is why, for white people, it is imperative. Right,
mm-hmm.
I'm literally working on a workshop like right now, today, all day, about like 3 steps to liberation work through anti-racism. And that first step is racially identifying. Because what
Mm-hmm.
happens is inside of whiteness, which exists here by itself in this box that it created alone to exclude everybody else in, they're ignored because
Right.
nobody cares, right? Because nobody in whiteness cares, because they're just using them to keep their ruling class status. They don't care.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah.
that's why what's happening in Jackson, Mississippi. That's why the holler exists. That's why they have shitty ass healthcare, teeth missing, like trailer park living. It's no different. You're not special because you're white.
No,
They just
no.
leverage the numbers, right? So like when you sit down and you really start paying attention to that, is that then they get to step out of
Mm-hmm.
whiteness, right? Because that's what desegregation and all that did. It really gave them more leeway to walk through our world freer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It did not make us more free. It made
No,
them
it did
more
not.
free. No, exactly. Thank you. It made them more free to just move in and out of these worlds. And so then they want to come here and center themselves.
Right.
Oh, look, me too. And it's like,
Right.
yeah, but you're refusing to deal with your racial identity and how violent your existence is when you come in here and center yourself with that. So, like, to make that bridge, to make that connection, that identity must exist first. Because, like
Mm-hmm.
you said, if we're just talking about how your mom treat, we know, honey. And if you, even if you were neurotypical, your mother would have treated you like that. Like, if
Right.
that's just
Right.
whiteness, those are the
Right.
systems that exist in there, right? But if we're not really going to be doing the work and centering unambiguously Black people and how are they impacted by all of these systems, you'll find yourself along there, white people. I promise you, because before it ever got to us, it ran through you. It was all created for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
They just justified it on the backs of unambiguously Black
Right.
people.
Yes.
So you'll
I
find yourself.
people often say, talk about canaries in coma. I don't think we're canaries in the coma. I think we're crash test dummies.
Mm,
And that's something that I say to people. It's like, black, when I say us, I mean Black people, because the tools that are created to harm us are going to be used to harm other people. And actually, that's what they're really there for. So in talking about the decolonizing neurodivergence, one of the things I talk about is how your family is your first system, is one of your first systems, and it brings in, those ways of looking at the world and tells you how you're supposed to think, how you're supposed to operate. And also another thing that I would say in there, going back to your point about corporation. So I used to think that school was a preparation for work. And so getting you ready for industry. And I think that is still the case, but I see it differently now after having talked to so many different neurodivergent people. I think I see school as work itself.
it
It is
is.
the work that little children are supposed to do. So if you go somewhere every day for a specified amount of time, there are these expectations of your behavior. Your behavior is more important than your needs. You are supposed to perform in a certain way to give the adults the things that they want. Then you have a job,
Yeah.
and that starts in daycare. And so if you can't sit crisscross applesauce, you can't walk in a straight line, then it looks like you're becoming more and more neurodivergent as you go along. But actually, what's happening is the box around you is closing in. It's getting
Yeah.
tighter and tighter as you go along.
Correct.
Um, and so like so people, I always get big responses when I talk about the quote unquote giftedness, because especially when I talk about how like being labeled as gifted is part of your job description.
Woo! Listen, I firmly believe that education is indoctrination in
Oh,
this land,
absolutely.
in this business of America. Because, like to all you said, and it starts even younger than the crisscross applesauce. We're talking 6 weeks. We're talking birth. Like,
Yes,
let's go
right.
to
Get out of the
birthing,
womb. Like
and they
even
turn
actually
around and
even
they make it a
into utero.
privilege.
Hmm.
This is what I mean about, like, they say these things are privileges. Oh, like night training and all of that. No, no, that's not a privilege to pay $7,000 to somebody to teach your child to cry it out or to go to sleep. Your
Right,
child wants you. Your child didn't
right,
live in, your child still smells like uterus. There is no
right,
privilege in that. Like, the privilege
right.
was for me, yeah, we were struggling much more financially, but I was able to feed on time, on demand, right? Like, extended breastfeeding. My children are now going to school 3, 6, and 10. That is a privilege,
Yes.
Reframing, reshifting what privilege looks like will get us back into our village mentality, which will actually free us of this neurotypical hell. Because neurotypical simply means can be programmed. The
Right.
neurodivergent brain is the evolution of where we need to go. We need evolutionary thinking. NT spaces and these boxes, like you're saying, that are created, anybody could do that. Anybody could
Mm-hmm.
just go along and and keep these systems going, and making and othering neurodivergent people, othering various abilities, or like you said, making it is a job description. I was labeled gifted and I've been ADHD since three, right? I'm like, and I was labeled gifted and skipped out of classes, and that did not do anything for me. It did not do anything for me, but placed more pressure on my
Right.
life as to what I was supposed to produce. And when you think
Mm-hmm.
about all of the things that the world says when you're somebody who's supposedly gifted, I'm producing, right? I'm supposed to produce more. I was expected to do more. I was Duke Kip. I was doing all of these things. I was Mensa. Like, why? Why am I doing this? Who's going to make money? Instead, I dropped out. I was a teen mother and got a GED.
But
Because
and that is actually very common.
too much pressure.
No, because you decided that you did not want the job that they tried to give you.
That part. Yeah. Not
That's
everybody.
what happened. Because here's the thing, these gifted programs are set up to do. It is a job, and your job is to continue the narrative that there's this merit system, number one, and that there's this huge achievement gap that Black people will never be able to close. So not you specifically, but but the white kids who are in there, they are there. They are offered those opportunities so that that gap looks a lot wider than it is. So what that means, though, is because we look at behavior and don't look at needs, a lot of gifted kids, their actual needs are overlooked. They are not
Absolutely.
addressed, right? But going back to the right to comfort, so then gifted children and their families are used to prop up this system, and how comfortable, how pleasing it is for the mother,
Yeah.
the parents, to say that their children are in gifted education.
And to prop up, like you said, it's numbers, right? When you really look at it, and I firmly, like, we could, there's so many lanes to this.
Hmm.
When we really, so like when I went to college, I took up psychology in the start, right? Then I realized I was 18 with a 3-year-old in college, and I was I need to make money. like
Right.
so, so we got married, yada yada yada. He went to the Air Force, so that was great. When I went back, I took business and marketing, and I am a firm believer that the reason why they do not teach us business math, accounting, and ledgers is because as soon as you figure that out, you absolutely can figure out this system. Because if you approach everything like a business. My accounting paper,
Hmm.
I aced because I did love as a business, because I did it
Hmm.
from the aspect of everything as a business, right? We even, our children, I want an ROI. What did I have this kid for? It's transactional. That is what
Hmm.
whiteness creates, right? So then, like, it comes into all of that. So even when you're gifted and pushed up, Cassie said, many of us were pushed into like these gifted status because yeah, I was horrible. like, just, like terrible, like fighting all of the things that you do when you're bored and your mind is racing and you
Right.
cannot focus on whatever it is to do. And so like, but they also use those children, and because I had went through that as my own childhood, and my mother was very much an advocate for like, no, we don't really need to be doing this or any of that kind of stuff. The same happened with my eldest child, and she was a really smart kid, but looking back on it, she's neurodivergent as fuck, and I never knew, because we only see disability as a physical
Right.
disability
Yes. Yes.
in an ableist world. If these are baselines, when we recognize that NT, like cis, hetero, Christian, able-bodied, thin, good-looking is baseline to survive, you don't
So.
see the things that you could be missing. And then that is where it gets back to that right to comfort, right? You don't
Mhm.
want to be uncomfortable. You don't want to take a look at your child's behavior and their needs because they're gifted. Look at
Right.
my kid. they're holding up, and I'm like, you're using my kids' numbers to prop up your fucking school. That's what you're doing
Yes, yes.
because she's acing
And it
everything
works
that
for a
comes
lot
out
of
of here.
parents. It works for a lot of parents. Um, so in the first book, I was so when I hear able-bodied, gifted, neurodivergent, what I hear are worker categories. So if I started with the premise that the child is a worker from day one, like you say, even before daycare, like even in utero, there's a there's a job that the child has to do. And neurodivergent, Black, those are worker categories. Those are places where people can be put to produce what the society wants those people
Right.
to produce. And so we all serve a corporate function. We serve the corporation in a certain kind of way. And so and that's how I got to, working my way around to the conversation about decolonization, because really what that's about is about resource extraction throughout a person's whole life. And with neurodivergent people, one of the things that is really hard to do, I think with neurotypical, I think this is consistent with what you were saying earlier. If you're neurotypical, it's easier to separate the source of the resource from the resource. So, like my labor and me, I can treat those as two separate things. With neurodivergent people, it's not the same thing because I got all kinds of sensory issues. And
Right.
you can't ask me to sit at a desk for 8 hours, and you can't ask me to go into a lunchroom where the
Can't do it.
sounds are muffled and keep extracting from me and extracting from me. At some point, I'm going to want something in exchange for that or to give me rest from that. It's not going to continue unfettered. I need rest from that. But a lot of people can just grind it out, just make it happen, kind of the hustle mentality. I it took me a long time to realize that, but I can't do that.
No, no. I mean, I realized that much younger, didn't have the words for neurodivergence, right? I was like, I can't work somebody's job. Like, I mean, like, I left. I would leave in the midst of it, right? Like, I have all the audacity of a white man. I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like,
Good for you.
not doing it. Not doing it. Just, I'm not
Yeah.
doing it because I don't want to. And that has always pretty much been my attitude. I happen to have a 3-year-old I'm now raising with that same attitude. So when you pair that with my own neurodivergence, it's like, yeah, I can't. I don't. And now that I have the words and the language around it, right? Like, I don't have the capacity. No, I can't work doing this because there's too much noise
Right.
going on around me. And I don't even know what's, and it literally brings me physical pain. Like
Yes, I
physical
can
pain.
relate.
You guys are
Yes.
making so much noise. I am in physical pain. And
Yes.
this
Yes.
leads into like when we're talking about all of these things, like when you start looking at these like chronic illnesses, depression, like all of the things people are getting treated for inside of
Yes.
the business that is the United States of America. I'm like, you do realize these are actually symptoms of being oppressed underneath whiteness.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Like,
You know,
that's it.
no, that's it. Like it's really that simple. It really is that simple. I was just thinking about um it relate on a related topic. I was thinking about community. Um, and I'm gonna make a video about this. And I was thinking about like just our relationships to our jobs or whatever. And I watched this video yesterday or day before yesterday with this woman. She was being harassed by this man. And so she felt like she had no other recourse but to contact his job and his wife. And so that's a common thing that has happened like on social media platforms, especially TikTok, where people get
I don't
called
love that.
out.
I don't love that. I'm
Well,
gonna be
look,
honest.
no, I don't either. But so here's the thing though. Why do people do that? Now, they have their
Okay.
individual reasons why, whatever. But what it also signals to me is what is missing.
Lack of
And
community.
lack of community. That's what's missing. Because if you had a community, you would have elders who could call people in.
Hmm.
The fact that you don't have to, that you feel like you have to threaten somebody's livelihood or their
Right.
marriage,
In
it means,
capitalism,
yes, it means that you don't, there is no mechanism, there is no community Now, whether it's right or wrong, but what it's what it also says is that there is no levers through the community that people feel like they have, because she begged him to stop and he would not stop. So this isn't like a call out thing, but she was saying she begged him to stop. But even in like we have no appeal system that isn't punishing our job, punishing our family, or
Punitive.
getting us involved with the law.
Because accountability underneath whiteness looks like violence. It looks
Yes,
like
yeah,
punishment. It does not look like, oh, why are you talking to her like that? Right? Like
right.
I found that like in my idea and version of dissolving these systems, equity happens at the bottom of the pyramid, right? Because whiteness
Mm-hmm,
is the pyramid scheme, right?
mm-hmm,
So you
mm-hmm.
have this ruling class right here, right? That nobody will ever get in. I don't care how white you are. You are not a misplaced millionaire. It's
No,
not happening.
it's not upperly mobile.
And not even, and like, here's what it is. Even if you're Jeff Bezos, that's why they call it nouveau riche. It still
Right,
ain't pedigree white.
right.
You
Yes.
still can't get in. It's not, there's no money ticket. It's pedigree. It is blood. It is blood. It is blood in, blood out. They are the original gang. Like, there's no getting in there, fam. None. There's no getting in. You cannot do it. So, anyway, in the pyramid scheme of whiteness, you have your pedigree whites, and then you have like those Jeff Bezos, like capitalists, and then you keep moving down, right? And it's like, yeah, but right here is where equity lies in poverty.
Mm, mm,
Equity for me, as I've like really looked at it all, I'm like, and I've said this in another video, is like, I grew up in the South Bronx, woefully poor. And I mean, like, paper food stamps, cheese line, hookers on the point, literally an HBO special, was
mm-hmm,
the block I lived on, right? On Bryan Avenue in Hunts Point. And I never felt more in community. Like when I look back on it,
mm, mm-hmm,
like I we could go anywhere. We could do all of the things. Everybody knew who my dad was. Everybody knew who my mom was. They knew that her attachment to them. Some things that people would call misogyny, right? They were like, "Oh, that's Ronnie's wife," but that was protection. I'm good on that.
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
want
mm-hmm.
that. When I walk around, I want somebody to know I'm Mark's wife. Don't you?
Right,
You don't
right.
want these problems because Mark is going to see about you. So leave me alone.
Mar got all the smoke.
I'm here for it. I'm not so feminist. I don't want to be protected in community, right? Like
Yeah.
that's what community feels like to me. And I've only seen that inside of spaces where everybody's at a base level. I found it again
Mm,
in the military, right? We're all in the same rank, so we're all getting the same pay, like, and I'm like, that is where equity lies, is literally in that togetherness, in that space of community. I made a point, like, right now, I'm obviously not in that point of my life financially, but like if I run out of sugar, I just don't got sugar until I could afford to buy sugar.
mm-hmm.
But when I was poor on food stamps on a cheese line, I'm sure I had sugar because somebody in my building had sugar.
Right,
And that
right.
to me is abundance, and that is community. But
Yeah.
these ruling class and this hierarchy of whiteness and going full circle into like right to comfort make you believe that, like, oh, that would be too uncomfortable to ask that, right? Like, so I'm going to
Right,
sit here with no sugar and be
right.
comfortable.
And
But it's a false comfort. Like, do you see how it's not real? And whiteness causes cognitive dissonance. Like, your body and your soul are never like aligned with your mind, because your
right,
mind is thinking one thing and your body that's been being separated from you since birth is never in alignment when it's within systems of whiteness. That's
well, and I can see this more starkly, and also because this is the population that I pay closest attention to with neurodivergent people who say, "Oh my God, this was happening to me the whole time." And so what happens is once we say, "Okay, this is the tag that fits me," then there's like this whole grief process because we knew it all along, right? But we were forced or to disconnect in order to survive in that moment. So it's like a whole thing about disconnection. But then it's also, the whole nuclear family thing, because that is an invention by public policy.
absolutely.
It is not just a cultural thing. there are public policies that were put in place to promote that, like, mortgages on houses or whatever, and the way they chopped up the suburbs and sold houses and things like that.
It's a business.
That was deliberate, that was intentional. And it's very alienating and very isolating. And so a lot of times when I work with so I also do coaching, business coaching, consulting with neurodivergent entrepreneurs, and we talk about some of this stuff. And one of the first things people want to say, like the white people I work with, they'll say, well, I understand I come from a place of privilege. I was like, I understand that, but what
Mhm.
I need for you to do, as the person who is facilitating this process and also as a Black person, is I need for you not to dwell on that as a deflection. I need for you to focus on how systems have harmed you, and
Right.
like in this space, I do need for you to center yourself, how
Correct.
systems have harmed you and how you have used systems to harm other people.
Correct.
Because if you don't really understand that has happened, then you're going to bleed all over me.
And I don't have time for that. I am not a triage nurse. This is exactly why I do, because I'm like, this is why, like, so Haven and I love Haven. Um,
You said I don't have time to be a triage nurse.
No, like who the hell has time? I have things to do, right? Like my famous line is
Right,
I got shit to do. So like I can't be
right.
playing around. I got shit to do. Like so I can't bandage up your wounds. You could be going over there and doing that, right? Haven and I have a podcast. I don't know if she has posted the second part of it, but the first part we were talking about it, and it's not white privilege, it's white leverage. Like that is what we
It is
discovered.
leverage.
It is leverage. Because even I personally, like when you talk about like people who are mixed people, like I don't have white privilege. That it can't exist. But I do know that my proximity to whiteness has been beneficial in my life. So what is it? What is it? Because it's what is it? And it's leverage. I absolutely leverage. Look at me. I can leverage that wherever I go, right? Like I am like the palatable Negro until I open my mouth, and then I'm militantly Black. But I can go places where unambiguously Black women can't, because there's already this predetermined look, right? Like if I straighten my
Hmm.
hair, throw some pearl earrings on, baby, I can move. I can move some places. A cute little
You can
blazer.
move, you can
I
move.
can move, girl. I can get in there. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's a leverage. It's absolutely
Mhm.
leveraging. And then, like, other white people who are actually, like, phenotypically showing up as white, not only are they able to leverage those systems against other people, the ruling class is leveraging their whiteness to
Yeah,
keep them the majority. It's
right.
absolutely brilliant. If
It
you're
is
talking about
brilliant.
evil mastermind, this was fucking brilliant.
It is diabolical.
It
It
is
is
diabolical.
brilliant in a very evil, megalomaniac kind of way.
Absolutely. But fascinating, right? Like when you think of the mind, and I'm like, this is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. And like, it's just it is fascinating. It is diabolical. It is very pinky in the brain, and they have taken over the world, and they really do kind of keep us placated with all of these other, it is nefarious, with all of these other issues, instead of
Right.
trying to like can we pause and can we, because the same few people, because it wasn't a lot, the same few people that put this together, it only needs to be a few people that could dismantle it,
Yeah.
and other people coming into alignment with it. It just takes new agreements. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just needs new agreements, and we could do this.
So So I have a question for you,
Sure.
because the word that keeps coming up for me as I'm talking about this. So I think about like how you were talking about the sugar, and you go get some cheese, whatever. And I've experienced that lately in my life. Like my life has done a 180 over the past few years, some by choice, some not by choice. And because there's just certain things I just could not abide anymore. But what I found it easier to do over the past couple of years is go ask people for things that I needed. And it was like, oh, well, shit, that didn't even hurt.
It doesn't. Isn't it
So
beautiful?
it is, and it is beautiful. And actually, what it has done is strengthen my relationships with the people that I've asked, because it created space for them to be a friend to me, as opposed to me trying to do everything with them, like for them. But my question for you, like the word that keeps coming up for me is shame, right?
Mm.
And because when I think about right to comfort, one of the things that we really try to avoid it, and trying to be comfortable is that deep-seated shame. And so, like, a lot of us, even in the Black community, we've been so conditioned to be like this fierce independence and don't ask anybody for anything. Do you see a future where we can push past that shame to actually form communities, more than just like a group here and a group there, but really start to think as a community?
Okay, so one, I'm going to answer that in two parts. Is that, or three parts, right? So, to the first part of it, is that one, yes. I think that shame is a huge part, and that comes from the fact that Christianization is the first colonization, right? And shame is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely powerful and it must be released. And I made a video in regard to that. Like, shame is something that has to go in all of the things, right? To explore anything that's going to be new
Mm-hmm.
and outside of the systems of whiteness. Two, I get nervous when I hear people, anyone say like community as a whole, right? Because we are
Mm-hmm.
tribal and clans type people anyway.
Sure.
So, like, we don't need to all come into alignment. We just need to simply make new agreements to say that we are going to rely on each other. And then find your tribe, find your
Mm-hmm.
people, right? Like Hebrew Israelites, I always bring these guys up because they are the most problematic of Black people. And people love to make it seem like because they listen to a Hebrew Israelite, we all feel like this. And I'm like,
Okay.
unless we are Black Hebrew Israelites, no other Black person agrees with them. Like, none. Like, not a single other Black person agrees with the Hebrew Israelites except the Hebrew Israelites. And that's fine. I'm not mad at them, right? Like, that's who they are, that's their tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I think that, like, okay, like, what we could do as a homogenous community in regard to releasing shame is one that all people, in my opinion, need to be working on releasing that. Um, and really just kind of coming into the idea that we do need community, just knowing that we need
Uh-huh.
community, releasing
Mm-hmm.
being a martyr, right? Like, and that's that
Mm-hmm.
individualism. Remember how I said they play into each
They
other.
feed
That
each
is how
other.
diabolical they are. They feed each other.
Yes,
You can't
yes.
just break them down one by one, because what you're talking about shows up differently in whiteness and in Blackness, because there are two different worlds. They were
Right.
created like that. So, like,
Yes.
it's fierce, you're so independent when you're Black, right? And then, like, this, like, individualism in whiteness is like, I am the only one that could do this. They have their own thing. Our mothers were absolutely fucking top tier narcissists, right? Like, narcissistic traits is white motherhood, right? I myself was this mother, probably why my eldest doesn't talk to me now. So I get it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
only I can do these things. Only I could do the dishes. Only I could do it right. Only, okay, kill yourself and do
Yeah.
that. And then, like, so it shows up in these two different places and spaces. So I think that the way to get to community is one, not needing to be a monolith,
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
allowing the liberation of people to unfold the way they're going to unfold, right? Like, are you, like I like blurs, right? Like, that they're their own tribe of Black people. Like, stop saying that they're white or they're trying to be white. Like, why do
Right.
you think so little of Black people and so much of white people? Like, unpack that whole situation right there.
Right.
So, like,
Right.
literally
Exactly.
just allowing people to find their own tribes and connections through their own cultural norms inside of those tribes, and recognizing that we all need to become interdependent in order to
Yeah.
exist. But interdependence can only happen where liberation exists, where you are free to find your own people. Like, I don't want to abolish the Hebrew Israelites. I just don't.
Right.
That's who they are. We are not
Yeah.
all them. That's, you know what I'm saying. So I hope that that makes it more clear.
No, it didn't. That is clear. So, the lingering question. So Andy says that's like we can't build a house with all plumbers.
Right. I love that. That's a great analogy.
Um, and thank you all for joining. It's good. So if you're hearing something you like, please go ahead and give likes. So, right. And I think, to think of it in a homogenous way, we're kind of right back to first base, step one, whatever. So if we believe in community and we are with our people, then how do we then maintain peace among the communities? How does
Okay.
that work?
That's a really great question. And I have thought about all of it. I mean, like, I have a whole thing. Because, one, I think that Black Americans need their own nation inside of here. Anyway,
Mm, mm,
period, point blank, full stop, hill I'm willing to die on. Definitely
mm-hmm,
Black nationalism. Um, like, because it just needs to exist. And then within that, very similar to like how any other tribes have existed, right? Like, not every clan has gotten along. You've seen it even when the United States, Hatfield and McCoys. Let's just keep it like American history, right?
keep it a
There's
buck.
going to be infighting. There's going to be inter-community issues. What I do not support and abide by is an overseeing government. Because someone
Mm,
earlier said, like, oh, so socialism. I'm not that, because it still takes an overseeing government. And I'm very much in alignment with, I don't like an overreaching government. I don't think a government needs to be in my life. I don't need to be
mm-hmm,
governed. Okay.
mm-hmm,
Community governs itself. Right?
mm,
Like, I, again, back to my own upbringings, I grew up in the South Bronx, and at that point in time, the cops used to call it Fort Apache, and they wouldn't even come in the Bronx. They wouldn't even come into
mm.
that part of the Bronx. We governed ourselves. Do people
Right,
die? Yeah. What kind of weird fucking world do you live in that people don't die?
right,
Like
right,
it again. That's that right to comfort. We're coming right back into it. Like this
right.
idea of utopia. People will die. People will get hurt. Things happen. But you know what I do know, and I realize even going back home in New York, is in community. Like, everybody knew somebody queer. Everybody knew somebody disabled. They were taken care of. I know boys that were on the basketball courts in their wheelchairs dusting those guys. And then their friends would
Mm-hmm,
take them back home. Like, so, like,
right.
I know very much what it looks like when you are just so, I mean, at the time, we were just so pushed to the outside and the outcast that we did become our own tribe of people.
Mm-hmm,
But you see this very much. New York City is something that is a very good actual idea of what it could look like, because it is the only place, and I've traveled, I've been out of this country, I've lived out of this country. It is the only place that I personally have experienced that is literally the hub of all of these various cultures
mm-hmm,
without stepping over each other.
mm,
Chinatown, Koreatown, you have Jewish neighborhoods, Irish neighborhoods, Italian neighborhoods, like you have Dominican spaces, like, and everybody coexists, and people
mm-hmm.
don't go into other people's neighborhoods. People, or if they want to, they go in there and eat. And so I know that it's something that can be done. And most of those places when I was growing up, very much inside of the Bronx, were poor and were not governed. They were ungoverned.
Mm,
I mean,
hmm.
for quite some time, it was called the Burn Down Bronx. I will, like, even the fire department was unbothered about our neighborhoods.
Wow.
So obviously, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we can govern ourselves. Like you said, like with community, having these elders, getting back into those spaces, right? Like having people that are like a healthy neighborhood kind of watch thing, right? Your community will look after you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that just happens in community when you
Right.
create community.
And
It's
that, yeah,
just
and that's
a
what I
it's a natural evolution. The same way we see this lack and this disconnect of community because of the evolution of white supremacy, you will see the gathering of community and what accountability looks like with the evolution of decentering whiteness and getting
right.
back to community. It will naturally evolve into it. It's to build
So
it. If you build it, they will come.
we had a couple of people. So Andy was saying that there's value and diversity within homogenous group. We need each other and one another's ideas. Bill is saying the U.S. is basically seven large tribes, but could easily be broken up into more. And then I think Andy had said something else. I missed what you said. There was something else you said, Andy, though. Hold on, get you. Um, anyway, well, hold on. No, here it is. Okay. The justification of paternalism is the false idea of perfection. Like if somebody isn't perfect, then the ruling class has to step in and oversee it. So we have cops, social workers, the justice system, etc., and people struggle to see that. And Andy says I keep talking, but and we are. I think perfectionism is on our list. So this is going to be a series,
It is.
and
Join us
I
next
think
week.
it's going to be Tuesday nights at the same time. We're going to do at least five. And we had an order, but it may just kind of go off what happens that week.
Yeah.
Um, but this is really interesting in just so many places where we could take the conversation, because I have, and I could just sit and listen to you talk all day. I have questions about, like all the tomfoolery on TikTok about, like Black men who are very committed to white supremacy
I
and
ignore them.
this
And
this whole
I ignore
thing,
them.
where
I,
so,
I
but the conversation is
yes.
about submission, and what's happening is they're doing the thing that white supremacy demands of them, or is asking them. They are doing the thing. So what I'm thinking about is like what you're talking about, going into community. The which question we may not be able to address completely here, but when you talk about going into these communities, how do you, because it requires a level of vulnerability.
I'm going to answer that. I already know. Um, so I'm going to answer Cassie really quickly. She said, "Do you think people think too large of a group of people when they think community?" Yes, because they have not decolonized enough. So what they start thinking is monolithic. All Black people have to get along. All white people have to get. I really, let me be very clear. I don't care if white people like me.
No, no, it doesn't really matter.
It
It doesn't matter.
it really like this idea, this emotional attachment. I'm not emotionally attached to whether anyone likes me or not, right? Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's just not my thing. I'm much more concerned to community care, right? Like, and you could care about somebody and not like them very much, right? Because there's an intrinsic value. When we start saying like or dislike, we start placing value based on
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy. I don't have to like you to know that you as a human being have an intrinsic value. You're a whole human
Mm-hmm.
being. You are a living thing. And so I care about you. So yeah, that's a whole other thing. But back to let me answering you. I think that they find their tribe too, Dr. Kim,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because like those men, those Black men, let me tell you why I ignore them. I think that Black men need to be talking to them. And there are plenty of Black men who are actually talking to them. And I leave that talk to the men folk because
You said talking to who?
the men, I think other Black men need to be talking to those Black men.
Yeah.
I leave that conversation to the men folk, and then I just applaud and support the Black men who are doing that work because I don't have the patience, nor do I desire to raise a man either. And those Black men that go into that idea and this alignment with the patriarchy, one, you're Black, sir. You are not the patriarchy. You are a tool of the patriarchy. At best, you could be misogynistic. You can never win the patriarchy.
No.
So, ever. So, I don't pay them any mind. And what we would do with them in community is, let me tell you, they don't want to be in the community with those people anyway. So, them and the pick me Black women who also think, or the lowbrow white women that they date, because these are the white women that have been ousted out of their community anyway,
Mm.
cosplay Black women, and quite often, everything is about being ghetto and hood and talking and doing this, that, and the third. So, like, again, allowing people the freedom to find their people. May
Right.
you,
Okay.
your beige babies, and your ghetto white woman be happy and stay away. That's it. That's all I got.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Um, like there's a thousand things I could say, but I'm gonna wrap it up because
And next Tuesday, we'll be back. We're not
right, we're
sure
out,
yet.
and I
Are we
want to make
sure?
sure we got some energy for the next few.
Yes.
But so we are gonna continue. So what we talked about today was right to comfort. We're looking at the list. We're looking at the tenets of white supremacy culture, and just talking about that, about related to that, talking about decolonizing, make sure people understand what we're talking about when we say decolonizing, and
Yes.
making sure we're clear about the terms that we're using. And this is just a wonderful opportunity. If you, I am, and Desiree can speak to what she's working on, but and currently crowdfunding using TikTok as my account to develop ideas. My second book on decolonizing neurodivergence. I ask that if you're a regular follower, please go click the first link in my link tree and support my crowdfunding campaign, because I pay for my publishing out of my pocket, or I have to take time away from my business to be able to write. And so I need support with that. I don't have outside support yet. And so please, 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 if you're a follower, you appreciate the content, and not just me, but other Black creators, because we are cranking out really good work, and
Yes, we
it
are.
shouldn't it should not involve struggle. It should not have to involve struggle when we have hundreds of thousands of followers. So please, please, please go support. And then Desiree, what do you have coming up?
Okay, so what I have. Okay, so there is a link in my bio. September 23rd to the 25th, we have Rona Racism and Radical Parenting um, conference coming up, and it's hosted by Parenting Decolonized. She is conscious parenting coach here on TikTok. Her name is Yolanda. I am the co-host with the
Oh,
mostest.
Yolanda Williams. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, she's amazing. So
Yes, she
that's
is awesome.
happening. She's really, really is. And we have really an amazing lineup of speakers helping you with scheduling, IEP stuff, neurodivergent parenting, just like all of this deep support with parenting. So that's the most pressing that's coming up. On my own personal thing, I am working on 3 steps because I like to keep it simple, stupid. Um, 3 steps to decolonization work. No, I am working on a 3 step little kind of course to put together. And very similar to you, I want people to recognize like this work for me is like one, legacy work, spiritual work, sacred work, all of the things.
Mm-hmm.
It is also the only thing that I actually charge for is a one-to-one with me. Everything else is donation and tips. And I don't want to struggle, and I'd be able to help more people. And so like I've pretty much basically my whole business model, because like I now have a subscription option. You should subscribe if you could afford it. It's
Yeah.
literally that simple. You should support me monthly if you could afford it. Does that make it exclusive? No, because you can't buy me. But it does make it equitable, because those that cannot support me, that will go out of their way. I know when somebody has gone out of the way, because they'll send me like $3 and be like, oh my God, please buy a car. And I'm like, wow, like how
Yeah.
beautiful is that?
It
And
means
so
a lot.
like really like people who could actually afford to subscribe to be a monthly regular supporter, think of this as my PBS special, asking. You should do so to make it equitable so that I could show up for those who can't. Because even my one-on-ones, that people who cannot afford the $75 that I do, I will not charge, or I do pay what you can. So think about that. Subscribe to the lives. We'll be back for the next 4 Tuesdays, is it? I think so. The next 4 Tuesdays, 7 p.m. Eastern, discussing these pillars. And like, yeah, so subscribe to anything that I have going on. If you go to DesireeBStephens.com, literally, I'm so accessible. My website says text me and you would get to my phone. So you should support that. I even have like a not going to lie link for people to ask me questions anonymously, and I answer that. I show up fully. And if you could afford to do so, show up fully so it could be equitable for those who really want to be doing this work and feel that they don't have access to it because they've been devalued by a system of capitalism. And that's my spiel.
No, this is good. I'm okay. So let's just be clear. Sometimes TikTok is a flaming bag of poop. Like that's just what it is sometimes.
Yeah.
However, having said that, it is also yeah, I do guest hosts. Andy asked if either of us do guest host on podcasts. Yes, I do. I'm sure Desiree, do you do?
I do
Guest
have a
host?
podcast. All of it is on my website.
Well, she's asking like, do you do guests or have a guest on podcasts?
I do. That's also on my website. There's literally a link that says podcast
Okay.
live. You could click it and book me.
Okay, gotcha. All right, just make sure I was understanding clearly. So yeah, yeah, it can be a dumpster fire. However, I am very appreciative of the opportunity to get to develop a lot of my ideas, but also get to connect with other creators such as Desiree, and we essentially co-create in this space. We co-create, our videos and comments and just talking back and forth through videos and ideas for future content with features like reply to video, things like that, or just ideas that people have sparked. So I'm very appreciative of this opportunity to be able to talk with you, and I look forward to growing this conversation over the next few weeks. And I think it's going to really spark a lot of important ideas for me. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing the time, co-creating, making new agreements, and really like this is amazing. This is like I feel like I'm living in my purpose, and you are affirming that. And so thank you for being here with me, for sharing and co-creating. That's it.
Very good. You guys have a
And
good
thank
night,
you all.
and talk to you next week.
See you next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Like, I would not be here if it wasn't for you. So, and I saw some subscribers, so thank you, much appreciated, because yeah, that is what it's about, is that like if you could do it, it keeps it equitable for everybody else. Yeah, so thank you for showing up. I'm gonna jump off so I can go see my tiny humans, and they go to school tomorrow. My son's first day is tomorrow. Yay! Thank you to my mods who are awesome. I'm gonna buy you guys coffee at least. Take care, guys. Good night. Also, yes. Oh, forget. Like, if you do have questions, like I said, if you go to the website, DesireeBStephens.com, you can actually, like, it will come to my phone and I will answer back. I also have a not gonna lie, so you could ask anonymously if you don't feel comfortable, because I know that we're working through shame and breaking down all of those feelings. So, like, there's a not gonna lie link in my Insta bio. Everything is in my Insta bio. Have a good night, guys.